to give you a bit of background about what LyondellBasell, or what we call LYB, is driving in the circular space. My responsibilities are around the feedstock sourcing, and feedstock is the feedstock of the future, which is plastic waste, and building the infrastructure to enable it to be the feedstock for both chemical recycling as well as mechanical recycling, and solvent-based, since we did acquire technology last year in that space. I'll go through a bit about who LYB is, just in case you're not familiar with it, and how we have started our roadmap, and we continue to drive it, and then we'll conclude with the questions. Hopefully I'll address more of those answers during that time. Oh, the lawyers asked me to put the disclosure, so that's just for any case there are any lawyers in here. Gotta have to always make sure they're happy. So LYB, we are a global chemical company, almost 20,000 employees across the globe. You can call about 50% in the Americas and 50% in Europe, Asia, international. Quite diverse from a cultural perspective as well. Sometimes I do feel we're a melting pot, which is great. You can bring different perspectives into the organization and different experiences. We are the #1 largest polyethylene and polypropylene producers in Europe. We're not the #1 here in the US, but we're in the top 5. And we are the #2 when it comes into propylene oxide. We're not just a manufacturer, but we're also a technology company. We do have one of our segments as a licensing and technology, as we are a leader in some of the primarily polyolefins and some olefins technologies as well. And here we are, we're also creating the landscape for the circular economy, and also creating new technologies in that space. So not our ambition, but it's actually our focus and our commitment to become a leader in providing sustainable solutions for our customers. And when we talk about sustainable, it's primarily circular and low carbon solutions. It starts with ending plastic waste to climate change, as well as our social responsibility. Social responsibility has been there for a long time. It's not anything new. Goal 0 when it comes into safety, making sure that we do have a diverse workforce, and then as well as when we are thinking about procurement, sustainable procurement, it's key to us. On the ending plastic waste standpoint, we committed or we have our ambition of 2 million tons by 2030. About 2 weeks ago, our CEO announced what we have accomplished so far. So last year, we have produced and marketed over 200 KTA of circular product, as well as from renewable feedstocks. And this was actually greater than 55% increase from the prior year. So we continue to make traction, we continue to drive in that space. We also invest in venture capitalists and circular funds. In Europe, we have invested in Infinity Recycling, which is a private equity fund or a venture capitalist fund that does invest in chemical recycling technologies. Here in the US, we've invested in Closed Loop Partners, and Closed Loop Partners does canalize investment into the infrastructure space as well as the processing of feedstock. Kind of between social responsibility as well as end of plastic waste, as an industry, we drive for, Operation Clean Sweep. It's a big initiative here in the US, but given our global exposure and our global footprint, we've actually taken that practice as well and taken it to our assets and sites in Europe and via our joint venture, Asia, as well as in the Middle East. And then on the climate side, I won't go through it because I don't claim to be an expert there. We have a whole organization that does drive all of our net zero initiatives, but we do have big commitments when it comes into scope 1, 2, and 3, and we continue to lead the way when it comes into incorporating renewable electricity as part of our power sourcing requirement. You can also follow us on all of our announcements that we do make as we accomplish certain milestones. I'll talk and focus more about the circular product portfolio. As I mentioned, we're not taking only one approach. We look at it as a multi-pronged approach. You may see out there in the industry, certain companies only look at mechanical recycling or only chemical recycling or only renewable. We're actually looking at all because we do recognize that the customer may not only want solution, but is looking at several solutions. And that customers are the brand owner, the converter, whoever is going to end up using the circular plastic portfolio. The three are from mechanical recycling, which we call it circular and recover. We're also debating that will call for our solvent-based type of circular products. From chemical recycling, we call it revive, and this is pyrolysis oil that we feed to the crackers, and I'll share an example later on in the presentation. And then circle and renew, which is from renewable feedstock, think through used coconut oil. That is, to date, what is considered renewable feedstock. Well, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get to the 2 million tons, or how we've been actually driving the over 200 KTA that we've achieved last year? So we believe in what we call it the integrated hub strategy, which is partnership as well as our wholly owned assets or footprint along the value chain. And the value chain starts at the feedstock. We're not going to be a waste hauler, we're not going to be a waste collector, but we're going to partner with someone who is going to give us a plastic waste as a feedstock. We'll build the advanced sortation technology, either our own wholly owned or via a partnership. I'm sure you have heard of the cyclic circularity centers. So this will be the feedstock sourcing here for us in the US as the initial steps. And then in Europe, we did have Source One Plastic, which is, we've built it and it has started up almost a year ago. And this will be the feedstock sourcing for our MoReTec technology or our MoReTec asset, which is a chemical recycling. Not everything has to be all in the same place, but we do see it as a connected ecosystem where you do have the feedstock coming in, it feeds in and it goes into your chemical recycling. Outside the advanced sortation, there's also feedstock that will go into mechanical recycling. And then if we need to even provide the next step after mechanical recycling for some specialty polymers, we do have our compounding capability and compounding assets. So talking a bit about our MoReTec technology, which is the chemical recycling. This is on-purpose chemical recycling technology. Some people can say standalone, but I call it on purpose because it's not just integrated somewhere within your own process, but you can actually build it and then integrate it downstream into your crackers. Why we see it differential versus maybe others, or based on what's conventional today, based on all of the testing that we had our pilot plant, which we actually have built almost over 4 years ago in Ferrara, Italy, and we've been testing plastic waste feedstock there, whether from Europe or actually from the US. We have seen at least a minimum of 80% yield, and this is plastics to pyrolysis oil and pyrolysis gas. So this is differential, to make sure that you're actually capturing the majority of the plastic waste and converting it into something. We also have seen, based on the LCA and the work, and you can see a huge footnote that our lawyer had put in, a 50% reduction in the greenhouse emissions. And this is when we are comparing it versus, getting the fossil fuel-based feedstock, as well as the plastic incineration. So you're looking at it holistically, cradle to gate. It is a catalytic process if you're trying to kind of work on the yield and improve it. And also we are designing it to be enabled to be powered by renewable electricity. So not just by regular, nat gas or utilities. As I mentioned, we've had the advantage of having the Ferrara plant built almost 5 years ago. So it's enabling us to continue to test plastic waste feedstock, see the differential characteristic and yields and performance and what's the output. Getting feedstock from different sources, especially here in the US with our infrastructure, from municipal solid waste or from MRFs or curbside. Same thing for Europe, from different EPR schemes. And then we have the first 50 KTA plant. It's been approved and it's actually in construction, destined to start up next year in 2026. And then here in the US, we're quite busy, pulling our value proposition together for a larger scale one, still subject for a final investment decision by our board of directors. And if you, trying to get your imagination on how is that circular revival, what's that chemical recycling process may look like it, think about consumer packaging, that it's actually, maybe film, hard to recycle plastic. I'm not talking about anything that today can be mechanical recycled. I'm thinking more about anything that is more like your bag of chips, multi-layer packaging, the wrap that goes around your meat. Make sure you clean it, wash it before you put it in, and take it to a film and flexible drop out. And all of that is kind of the feedstock that is considered as post-consumer plastic waste. This goes into a sortation center. It gets actually shredded, dried, agglomerated or densified. This becomes actually the feedstock that you feed it into the MORTEC or the chemical recycling unit. Out of it comes in the pyrolysis oil and the pyrolysis gas. This becomes a feedstock that you integrate into a liquid cracker. So we as a company, we've had the advantage to have liquid cracker continue to be in our networks here in the US and of course in Europe. And then from there, you've got it via mass balance approach going into ethylene propylene and then downstream into polyethylene polypropylene or however it will be allocated to. And then from there you provide the circular product to your customer. On the mechanical recycling front, we have several assets in our European network. Here in the US, we acquired a plant in California almost a year ago, and we've actually been doing lots of feedstock testing, and we are in the process of upgrading the plant to make quality post-consumer recyclate. We're planning to start up and commission early next year. So a lot of people asked us why California. Usually California is known that it's a bit challenging from a business perspective, but we looked at two key things. One is feedstock landscape. California today is one of those states in the US that does actually enjoy a high recycling rate. And then so feedstock availability will be there, which is very important when you're thinking about something where feedstock is still developing. And then the second, I would say a tailwind was primarily on the legislative landscape, giving the extended producer responsibility, which is an EPR scheme that is going into effect, as well as the post-consumer recycling mandates for plastic products on the shelf in California. So those were two key things that drove and helped us into thinking about this investment and this opportunity in California. And this will be the first of several that we're considering and looking at here as well in the US. That's pretty much it for what we're doing so far. I know I touched a little bit more on the US side versus what we're doing in Europe, but Europe is leading the way as usual, giving their legislative landscape. And if you ever want to follow us and get to see where we're doing and how we're tracking in our goals, feel free to get the QR code and follow us there.
Excellent, Mariane. Thank you. Please join us up here and
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Here, there,
anywhere, wherever.
All right, I'll say it right here, so you don't have to be loud.
So thank you again for taking the time to do this. I appreciate this. Mariane, maybe we'll start with the last piece first, the mechanical recycling piece. We'll dive in because it's an interesting conversation, and maybe we'll take a step back, right? I mean, so I think if you look at recycling in general in and around plastics, we started off a few years ago with a lot of interest in and around chemical recycling. There's a lot of interest in pyrolysis, a lot of offtake agreements were announced by pyrolysis companies. They started feeding it into some of the ethylene liquid sweat crackers and all of that. And then we've seen some of that kind of some of that enthusiasm kind of come down, and instead mechanical recycling has kind of picked up a little bit. I guess, how do you explain that, and I guess how do you see things going forward in the future?
Sure. Maybe I'll start on the mechanical recycling piece first, because it's a little bit easier, and then we can go on to the chemical recycling. So mechanical recycling, the feedstock is readily available today. And in the US, if you think about regions where high population density, favorable recycling laws, think the Northeast, West Coast, Midwest, the feedstock for mechanical recycling is available, because it's pretty much what you're putting in your curbside, whether it's your detergent bottle or the milk jug, or your polypropylene containers for yogurt, or butter, and on other type of applications. So all of that is available today. And given the demand for circular product continues, and you see some of the pledges from large brand owners, there is a drive for mechanical recycling, but it's in certain application. It's not for all application. There's still sensitivity around food contact. We as people too, if you think, this is the right place where it goes into potentially food packaging? So there are limitations there. So that has been the key driver, because people saw the value and it exists, and the infrastructure to build it and the infrastructure to get the feedstock is less burdensome than for chemical recycling. Move on to chemical recycling. So chemical recycling, it's important that the feedstock for it does not compete with mechanical recycling. It's going to be more for hard to recycle plastic, like I mentioned, multi-layer films, more film and flexible type things. Film and flexible is not destined to mechanical recycling, because today you do see mechanical recyclers for film and flexible. So chemical recycling, the feedstock infrastructure is not there. The plastic waste is available. There's plenty of it. If you look at the US, you've talked about what the polyolefin industry size is, and you have visibility to how much polyethylene and polypropylene is produced in the US on an annual basis into the domestic market, as well as consumed into non-durable product, which is pretty much what goes into the recycling bin to a large extent. But the feedstock to enable, or the infrastructure to enable that feedstock for chemical recycling is not as simple as what we think. Those are advanced rotation, which is, you're trying to take different types of plastic, there's potentially contamination, and you're trying to reduce it down to polyethylene and polypropylene, and then make it into what you call an aglo pellet that becomes the feedstock. So there's also some technical challenges. You gotta have to understand how it works. Not all feedstock are created equal, and we can attest to that based on the testing that we've done so far. So that had been some of the challenges of why chemical recycling hasn't kicked off. And so that's one. Two is the projects aren't, they're not quick to come online. Maybe larger scale polyolefin asset or a cracker will take a much longer time from, idea to finish. For chemical recycling, it's the same thing. It's no shorter at all. So that is the second one. And third, of course, is the capital. It is still much cheaper than it is for a whole new cracker or polyolefins asset. But, you still have to have the capital backing, and see also, the demand lined up for it back to back.
Yeah. It also feels to me that a lot of chemical companies have made commitments around recycling goals and all of that. And mechanical recycling is a good way to kind of make some progress, right? And
Yes.
it might not be ideal progress, but I'd rather lose 5 pounds than all the 50 I'm supposed to, right? So
Correct.
there's some progress.
There is. Yeah.
Do you see learnings from mechanical recycling that help you advance chemical recycling?
Yes, definitely. And it's more on the mechanical part and more on the design and the setup of sortation.
Okay, the feedstock part of that.
Yes, correct. Think about the advanced sortation, which is the front part of any chemical recycling unit. It's almost like a mechanical recycling asset.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of learning around efficiency and how to run it and how to make sure that it's going to have a higher utilization. Again, those are equipment that or assets that when you think about them, they're not as steady state and running all the time as a polyolefins unit or a cracker. So, there are things, equipment-wise, things get stuck sometimes. You're going to have to come down and get it fixed. So yeah, there's a lot of learnings in that space into it. As well as kind of also getting a feel for what's still clean feedstock that should truly go for mechanical recycling, or even for solvent-based, which is a dissolution type of process, versus having it to take it to chemical recycling. Because at the end, we see each one of them complementary to each other. They have their own customer. They have the need for it. Not every customer wants a pellet from a chemical recycling. It's more based on the application and what it will go into. So there is a lot of, I would say, we're getting a good feel for optimization and what goes where.
Yeah. Do you think the participation of the chemical industry in mechanical recycling helps expand mechanical recycling?
It will. For some reason that, you do see there's compatibility. You already understand as a polymer or a resin producer, you have understanding of the chemistry of making a pellet. So you also will understand and test for the compatibility between a post-consumer recycled pellet from mechanical recycling, as well as incorporating with a virgin pellet.
Yeah.
So
but fundamentally, this is a feedstock constraint, right? I mean, there's probably milk jugs and HDPE that you would prefer to recycle mechanically, and some of that is outside the control of chemical companies because it depends on the recycling infrastructure.
That is true.
And all of that.
Yes, that all depends on the recycling, how many MRFs will be built.
Yeah.
What policies will go in place to actually enable and catalyze the recycling rate.
So since you're talking about policies, and as you can see, I'm not going exactly what I had promised to do. Some of this is my curiosity is following the conversation. But what needs to happen, right, in terms of policy? So I know you guys are members of the Cyclics Consortium. Cyclics is establishing. I think they announced they took FID on
second circularity center.
The second
Yes.
circularity center.
And we're a joint venture partner.
Yeah. So I guess would policy help to expand that to 20? Like, what would it take? For...
Sure. So I'm gonna probably use Europe as an example first because it's a great example to use. I'm not saying that we're gonna be where they are, because here in the US, again, you've got 50 states, and every state it's more at the state level rather than the federal level. So Europe, looking at the PPWR, which is one of the policy around plastic packaging that just went into effect last month, it requires by 2025, an X% PCR content, 2030 at 30%, and then it goes up exponentially to 50-60% in 2040. So this is creating a regulation that any plastic product on the shelf is going to have that much X% PCR, post-consumer recycled content. With that in place, it does incentivize creating the infrastructure. It does incentivize the collection of plastics and returning it back to the system as feedstock. So great. You've got, PCR mandate at the end, which is driving, the demand, as well as you've got also the infrastructure mandate that requires a lot of that feedstock to come back into the system. And this is across the majority of Europe, I would say, or over 75% of Europe. Here in the US, we don't have that everywhere. If you do go to the Northeast, there are certain states that have that, and there's been almost 5 states, we're going into 6, that have enacted EPR schemes, with California and Colorado being the leaders, to making sure that they do actually have an extended producer responsibility system, which actually, again, will enable the infrastructure, will increase recycling rate, and will be the catalyst to ensure that this feedstock is created for mechanical or chemical.
In terms of policies, do you see the availability or lack of recycling infrastructure defining your recycling process strategy? So what I mean is, in states where you have well-established, like California, maybe mechanical recycling has a bigger share in the recycling mix, while in states like Texas, you rely more on chemical recycling. It also fits well with the fact that we have a large brownfield process industry infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that feedstocks are transportable.
Okay.
So could impact.
That's not a widely held view. I mean, but in a lot of our work, for example, there are a lot of companies that are much smaller companies, project developers who are trying to develop recycling projects, and they tend to define like a 200-mile radius.
And so from a logistics standpoint and operation and cost optimization, that is the most optimal way to go. But if you look today, for instance, at the trade flow of the bale market of, let's call it, high-density polyethylene, the majority of the demand today, based on the existing of the or the footprint of the mechanical recycling in the Southeast or the Midwest, and the feedstock flows from the Northeast, from the West Coast, from Midwest to those regions.
That has been a historical trade flow, not just because today recycled HDPE prices are higher.
That has been the historical, and it continues to be.
Okay.
So, if you want to optimize, for us, we saw the opportunity again to go to California. This is a way to optimize, but not necessarily everybody has that capability to do so. There's also the view that you want to be closer to your customer, because that's also an important factor. So from our side is, we continue to advocate and influence where policy, we see it that it's, driving into the direction to creating that, whether it's an EPR scheme or a PCR mandate in the region where we also see where the demand as well as the feedstock availability.
Okay. I am curious a little bit about the remit that you have at Lyondell. Your title says feedstocks and mechanical recycling. So I'm assuming the feedstocks piece is for all recycling.
It's for all, and actually, what is not, since otherwise it would be a really long, title. It's also establishing the infrastructure. So, establishing all of the advanced sortation infrastructure is actually part of my responsibility as well as my team.
Okay.
So the Cyclics venture, as well as any other types of advanced sortation that we partner in or we engage in. Part of our responsibility.
Okay, so we've done a lot of work with some of the companies developing chemical pyrolysis-based technologies, and one of the difficult parts of the learning curve has been the realization that just building the recycling technology is not enough. You have to do quite a bit of capital has to be invested in the feedstock prep part, the sortation, cleaning, shredding, grinding,
densification, and getting it to the right spec.
And prior to that, right, building the relationships to get the right spec, as you said, right?
That's
because not all. So how's LyondellBasell going about all of that? I mean, you guys obviously have a lot more scale and heft and relative to some of these project developers, but it's still a very it's still a very difficult problem.
I would say our strategy has been to engage with industry partners as well as others who have same purpose as ours in getting the feedstock. So I will start with Europe, for instance. We did have the joint venture on the Source One, which is an advanced sortation to make a densified product or what would be more tech. We started that ahead of time. We didn't want to wait till last minute. You do not want to have your feedstock coming in right before your chemical recycling. You want to give some time to be able to test it, to ensure it's working, get it to the right composition, and then from there, you go with a smooth startup and commissioning of your chemical recycling asset. So the plant has started almost a year and a half or so before, when we have our plans for more tech. Here in the US, we understand the complexity of the infrastructure. So the Cyclic partnership, which we entered into back, I believe, in late 2023, was the FID of the first circularity center, and then late last year was the second circularity center final investment decision, and both of them will be coming online over the next couple of years. With that, again, we're preparing the way, understanding, getting more visibility to what the feedstock will look like. Not saying that we're not working in addition to that on our own other plans and making sure that we do also have a risk mitigation for where the feedstock will come from. But again, we're not going into waste collection. We're not trying to be the waste management or the Republic, but we are cooperating with folks in their space to find where create value both for themselves and ourselves too.
Do you find the waste management companies kind of stepping up to this?
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. And I can see it where they see they can bring in the expertise and the knowledge. For instance, you've seen Waste Management investing in Natura, which is a mechanical recycling of LD, LL, as well as Republic on the blue polymers. Again, it's more on the mechanical side, which is their space, but I also can see them potentially as a provider of feedstock for the chemical recycling world.
But so the big disconnect that we saw from our work is that waste management companies, not WM, but waste management companies more broadly, they're pretty much a utility business, and they need to have very secure visibility into revenue streams, and their ability to invest in capital is very limited, which is why they have historically kind of not embraced waste plastics recycling as one would expect, because they are in many ways the natural owner of that space in the value chain, and therefore but then the consumer pressure, the regulatory pressure is on the chemical companies, and therefore they've had to move a little further back into the value chain. But the challenge has been that they don't understand the space, and there's a big learning curve that they have to navigate. So I think partnerships make a lot of sense here if they come through.
Yes, and partnership doesn't mean that you have to have a joint venture. Partnership could also be some type of long-term agreement where they, most of them, if I put myself in their shoes, they want to make sure that if they do the investment to create the feedstock space for you, they want to make sure that you're also going to be out, in a sustainable business model, that you will continue to take the feedstock. Same thing even happened 10 years ago after the evolution of shale gas, and you had more, ethane and NGLs coming out of stream. You want to make sure that you've got the backup side, whether it's a cracker or new capacity coming online to offtake those.
We had our keynote speaker yesterday was a private equity investor who was invested in plastics recycling facilities, and he was lamenting that they are going through a very difficult time right now, and some of it is because virgin plastic is so much cheaper, right? So I wonder, what are your thoughts on how mechanical recycling is doing as a sector? I won't ask you specifically how your investments are doing, but just more broadly speaking, and what do you see as the outlook?
Yeah, sure. The headwinds today, we see them, as temporary, right? I wouldn't comment. I wish I did have the crystal ball to tell when things are going to improve. I don't. But we know why there are challenges on the mechanical recycling space. The ones, and we do have mechanical recycling asset today in Europe, and we do sell to specific application. When you produce quality PCR, the demand is there.
Okay.
And the commitments are there, and people are willing to take it and test it. So it goes back to what's the quality of that PCR is, and also what the application that it's going into.
Yeah.
If it is an application that's competing with an application that can be met easily with a virgin product, and there's no need to incorporate PCR, then there's going to be a challenge.
And probably on that end, probably chemical companies have an advantage because they have existing relationships with a wide range of processors, converters, fabricators. They have better insight into markets and can segment those customers and markets more thoughtfully, creatively. And in terms of Lyondell's plans, you intend to build a chemical recycling plant here. It's subject to FID. I understand that. Is it going to come at this refinery that you currently own? Is that the plan, or
location TBD? I can't disclose too much. But
Okay.
Location TBD. It's going to be in the Houston area. That's what
okay.
I would say. Once again, subject to final investment decision.
Okay, excellent. Global Plastics Treaty, like thoughts, comments, feedback on that?
Yeah. Well, it continues to go into INC 5.2, which is going to be sometimes this year. We do hope that all parties kind of put emotions aside and reach some type of mutual agreement on where it should head. We have seen and we believe that production cap could be a disadvantage or disproportional to developing regions.
Yeah.
So we hope that policymakers take that into mind and see it.
I think collectively that's the position of pretty much all large chemical companies, right? That
Can't speak of others, but I can speak of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the focus needs to be more about ending the plastic waste and creating the infrastructure for a circular economy versus just a production cap. From our side, we're preparing ourselves, and that's why we've been leading the way in terms of driving the roadmap on circular products, as well as renewable feedstock to be part of our feedstock slate to create those solutions for the customers. So hope that they find resolution, and it feels that it might be heading that way for this year. So I think everybody's quite tired of one negotiation after another, and so hopefully INC 5.2 is seal the discussion.
I'm sure your policy folks are waiting for it to get to some sort of resolution.
Yeah, they're quite patient.
Mariane, what's happening? What's happening in Asia Pacific around recycling? I wonder if you track.
Yeah, we actually do have a joint venture that we executed mid last year in the rigid space for high density and polypropylene in China.
Okay.
It's called LYB Genox. So Genox is an equipment manufacturer of actually mechanical recycling equipment.
Okay.
And we did have a joint venture with them, and it's been up and running since last year, and producing high density and polypropylene PCR.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to open this up to questions from the audience and see if there's some questions here.
Hi, Mariane.
Hi.
I'm kind of curious to know, with the change at the leadership at Lyondell from Bob Patel to Peter Vanacker, has that because his background with Neste and all that, has that sort of driven more, or I guess how much of that had to do with the focus on recycling and renewables versus other factors, do you think?
We actually have started the journey on the circular products prior to 2020. So our commitment and the pledges and around the 2 million tons came out in about 2019. So that was prior to the current leadership. With the current leadership and our current strategy, it amplified it at one pillar of our three, strategy pillars. So the first one is upgrade the core, and grow the core, which is our core businesses, olefins, bioolefins, the chemical. Two is build a profitable circular and low carbon solution. So it was going, but now it's more amplified and getting a bit more, resources as well as attention in terms of looking at it for the future. And then the last piece was the step up performance and building the culture, which just continue to drive that space. So I wouldn't say that it just existed now. It existed before, and it just got more amplified and coming up as a key pillar to our strategy.
Hi, Mariane. As you think about investment in the U.S., I guess you have a bunch of different things going on. You have low energy costs, lessening regulations, but at the same time, potentially there's this ESG backlash. There are all these things going on. So how do you guys think about investment in the U.S. specifically relative to Europe, Asia-Pac, elsewhere? Which that could probably be a 2-hour answer. I know that's a big question.
No, it's a great question. We're addressing the problem of, ending plastic waste as well as creating the solution globally. Regulations are always going to be around. They could change. Administration will change. So we continue to be very much focused on value creation. And if there's an investment in the U.S. that's going to create value, then it's going to go forward. We have specific criteria. We're not just going to make an investment for the sake of making one or making a splash. We go through a rigorous process, rigorous analysis. The good news is the demand is global. Most of the brand owners are global companies. Converters are also global companies, and their commitment is not only in one region versus another. It could be that they've got bigger commitment and bigger requirement and regulation in, for instance, Europe or Asia versus the US, but they still also have to meet those commitment here in the US. So it's, again, our investment are very much demand driven and going after creating value. Welcome.
More questions?
How do you compare the quality of the pyrolysis oil from the plastics to the one you make in the crackers?
Great question. And maybe I didn't go over it when I had the diagram out there, but part of our value chain creation too of a circular roadmap is having post-treatment, because we recognize the pyrolysis oil that will be produced from chemical recycler, it's all going to depend on the feedstock. There could be some impurities, there could be some other contamination that you do want to take out before you put it in the cracker. So post-treatment or hydrotreating, we see it as a key component of the value chain to enable quality pyrolysis oil, which is going to be quite close to a naphtha type of feedstock, to go into the cracker.
Thank you. There's been news in the paper recently about recycling being dangerous. Should I get rid of my black spatulas that I use for cooking?
That's a great question. Claims are always going to be claims. For us, it has to be data-driven, and you got to see the facts and the science behind it. So if the science and the facts behind it tell you that you need to do so, then do it. But if you can't find it, then I'll leave it to your choice to make.
So in your house, do you have black spatulas for cooking?
I'm sorry.
In your house, do you
What he's asking
own-
is, have you gotten rid of them?
Yeah.
Oh, the black spatulas?
Yourself personally.
I don't cook much. I'm working.
There's a question there.
So this morning, there was a speaker on a panel from Braskem this morning, and his philosophy was, as far as investment of Braskem, it's better to invest in other projects and not invest into pile oil upgrading and such, and that there's other infrastructure available to doing that. What's LyondellBasell's approach on that?
I think I just mentioned it earlier. I mean, for us, I think every company has their own way of doing business and looking at it. We, as a company, we are quite integrated all the way from the cracker down to even the specialty polymers. We do see the value that, for us, I mean, we've got our own technology, so we're, and we're scaling it up. So we're deploying that and we're scaling it up. And we also do see the value that we are integrated, via post-treatment. So to the point that I mentioned earlier, we're not going to invest into something just to have it along the value chain. It has to create value. When we think about value, we're thinking about the integrated value.
So question there.
Yeah, thank you. It was almost on the same lines as how important do you think is existing infrastructure and leveraging what you already have in the ground for you before you make these decisions?
Sure. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, we actually, with the evolution, or prior to the evolution of shale gas, we had liquid crackers. So we've converted some to NGLs, but we continue to maintain the advantage of having liquid crackers in our portfolio. So we're able to actually process pyrolysis oil, naphtha, any type of those feedstock. So it's all about what capability you have and can you actually leverage them and continue to utilize them and tap into them.
Can you feed pyrolysis oils into ethane, LPG fed crackers at some volumes?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
I believe you have to have a liquid cracker. I actually used to be a furnace engineer a long time ago, steam cracker engineer. That's pretty much all of my time. So I'm tapping into my almost 17, 18 years ago. Not aware of any, but who knows? Maybe there is a technology developing today that is able to do so.
Well, we are at time. Mariane, really thoughtful, insightful discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. We're going to take a break, but we have two more very good panels coming up, one on innovation and one on investor perspective. So please do stick around. It's going to be a good use of your time. And with that, let's give Mariane a hand.
Thank you.